In the deepest corners of the galaxy, countless civilizations thrived. Some were vast empires spanning hundreds of star systems, with populations numbering in the trillions. Others were smaller coalitions controlling a handful of planets each. For thousands of years, these civilizations maintained a fragile balance of power. They competed, formed alliances, and waged wars. But the galaxy had rules, and every species understood the consequences of breaking them. Technology, military strength, and cunning diplomacy were the keys to survival, and every empire believed it was at the top of the hierarchy. Among these civilizations, the idea of humans was almost a myth. On a few old star charts and scattered intelligence reports, there were mentions of a small blue planet at the edge of a relatively quiet sector. The reports suggested that the inhabitants of this planet had achieved space travel, but only recently. The prevailing assumption was that humans were primitive, slow, and insignificant. Many of the galaxy's leaders laughed at the idea that such a small, isolated species could pose any real threat. After all, they had never demonstrated a kind of technology or coordination that could challenge established powers. Humans lived on a planet called Earth, a world that seemed ordinary at first glance. Its landscapes were a mix of oceans, continents, forests, deserts, and mountains. From orbit, it looked like a fragile jewel, vibrant and full of life, yet vulnerable. Unlike the empires that had sprawling fleets and weapons capable of destroying planets, humans had spent most of their history focused on survival and innovation within their own limited sphere. They had wars, political disputes, and social challenges, but their resilience and determination were unmatched. Over time, humans learned to solve complex problems, invent advanced machines, and eventually reach for the stars. The development of human space technology had been slow but steady. They had started with small spacecraft capable of reaching nearby planets and moons. These early explorations seemed minor compared to the interstellar empires that controlled vast swaths of space. Humans were quiet observers, cautious explorers who did not draw attention to themselves. This was partly by necessity. They knew the galaxy might not welcome unknown species that suddenly appeared with advanced capabilities. They had no desire for unnecessary conflict, and they understood that stealth and patience would serve them better than reckless confrontation. However, behind this calm exterior, humans had been building something that no alien civilization could have predicted. Secretly, they developed massive fleets of starships, advanced weapon systems, and powerful engines that could travel faster and farther than anything else in known space. Their fleets were designed with precision and discipline in mind. Every ship, every pilot, and every weapon was part of a larger strategy. Humans trained for coordination, efficiency, and adaptability. They learned from history, observing the successes and failures of other civilizations, and they applied those lessons to create a force that was not only technologically advanced but also strategically brilliant. While the galaxy dismissed humans as insignificant, humans were quietly studying the empires around them. They observed how wars were fought, how alliances formed and collapsed, and how power could shift in an instant. They learned the weaknesses of empires: arrogance, overconfidence, reliance on outdated technology, and the tendency to underestimate smaller, less-known species. They also studied diplomacy, politics, and economics, realizing that understanding an enemy's behavior was just as important as having superior firepower. By combining intelligence gathering with careful technological development, humans prepared themselves for a moment when they could step out of obscurity and be recognized not as a minor species, but as a dominant force. On Earth, human society had reached a level where such development was possible. Nations once divided by petty conflicts learned to cooperate on large-scale projects. Scientists, engineers, strategists, and military leaders worked together to achieve what seemed impossible. Secret facilities were built on distant moons and hidden planets, far from the prying eyes of alien scouts. Here, humans constructed massive starships, tested advanced weapons, and trained crews to operate in ways that other civilizations would find unimaginable. They even developed artificial intelligence to manage complex operations, ensuring that human fleets could coordinate attacks across multiple systems without delay or error. The humans' patience and secrecy were essential. If any alien civilization had discovered the full extent of human capabilities too early, it might have provoked a preemptive strike. The galaxy was filled with empires that did not hesitate to destroy what they did not understand. Humans knew that survival required not only strength but also timing. They waited for the moment when their appearance could have the greatest impact, when the galaxy was unprepared and vulnerable, and when their fleets could operate with maximum effectiveness. As humans prepared in secret, alien civilizations continued their routines. They sent scouts into unexplored regions, mapped planets, and engaged in their own political and military maneuvers. These civilizations had vast resources, enormous fleets, and generations of experience. They assumed that nothing in the outer sectors could challenge their dominance. Even when scouts reported unusual signals from the edges of the galaxy, they dismissed them as anomalies, natural phenomena, or minor threats. Few suspected that these signals came from a species that had quietly become more powerful than anyone imagined. In addition to technology and strategy, humans had developed a unique mindset that set them apart. They were curious, adaptable, and resilient. They learned from failure and did not let setbacks define them. Whereas some civilizations relied on rigid hierarchies and outdated traditions, humans were flexible, constantly innovating and improving. This mindset allowed them to overcome challenges that would have crippled other species. They approached problems creatively, using unconventional tactics that alien empires could not predict. It was this combination of intelligence, innovation, and determination that would make humans a force unlike any the galaxy had ever encountered. The galaxy, meanwhile, remained unaware of the growing threat. The most powerful empires believed their borders were secure. Their fleets patrolled the known regions, their spies gathered intelligence, and their politicians negotiated treaties. They assumed that the distant, unexplored regions were of little consequence. No one imagined that humans were not only watching but preparing to enter the galactic stage in a way that would shake entire systems. It was in this atmosphere of complacency and underestimation that the first scouts encountered the human fleets. These scouts were the initial eyes and ears of alien civilizations and regions humans had quietly explored. When the scouts first reported seeing human ships, they did not recognize the scale, coordination, or power of these fleets. They described them as small exploratory groups and did not anticipate the threat they posed. The human ships were sleek, fast, and heavily armed, but they were also designed to operate as part of a larger, unified force. Each vessel had a purpose, each crew knew their role, and the fleet as a whole could execute strategies that alien commanders had never seen before. The first encounters between humans and alien scouts were subtle but telling. Human ships did not attack immediately. They tested the scouts, observing their reactions, mapping weaknesses, and gathering intelligence. The scouts, in turn, underestimated the humans, assuming that they were dealing with primitive explorers. This miscalculation would be the first of many. The humans' patient observation allowed them to prepare for the moment when open conflict became unavoidable. They learned everything they could about the scouts' technology, tactics, and communication patterns, ensuring that when the time came, they could strike with precision and efficiency. In these early stages, humans demonstrated something that would become their defining trait: strategic patience. Unlike empires that rushed into battles or sought immediate glory, humans waited, calculated, and adapted. They understood that their true strength lay not only in firepower but also in timing and intelligence. By remaining hidden and preparing carefully, they positioned themselves to change the course of galactic history with a single, decisive action. This period of preparation and observation was crucial. Humans refined their technology, trained their crews, and tested strategies in simulated environments. They learned how to anticipate enemy movements, exploit weaknesses, and coordinate attacks across vast distances. By the time alien civilizations realized the true nature of humanity, it would already be too late. Humans were not merely a species with advanced technology, they were a disciplined, strategic, and adaptable force, capable of reshaping the galaxy according to their own terms. As the first scouts returned to report their encounters, they underestimated the humans yet again. They described them as unusual but not dangerous, failing to convey the scale of the threat. Alien empires, distracted by internal politics, old rivalries, and overconfidence, ignored these warnings. They assumed that if humans were a threat, they would have revealed themselves by now. Little did they know, humanity's moment was approaching, a moment that would change the galaxy forever. Humans, on the other hand, continued their quiet preparations. They built more ships, refined their tactics, and studied the galaxy with meticulous attention. Every decision, every action, was part of a larger plan. They knew the galaxy was unprepared, and they intended to use that to their advantage. What others saw as a backwater species, humans saw as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of intelligence, discipline, and unity. In summary, the galaxy existed in a state of false security. Civilizations assumed they were the dominant powers and ignored the potential of a species that had quietly developed extraordinary capabilities. Humans, patient and disciplined, used this underestimation to prepare a force capable of rewriting the rules of interstellar power. Their fleets, their technology, and their strategic mindset would soon make themselves known, catching alien empires completely off guard. The stage was set for a confrontation that would leave entire systems collapsing and the galaxy forced to recognize that humans were no longer insignificant, they were a force to be reckoned with. The first signs of human presence did not go unnoticed. Alien scouts who had ventured into the outer reaches of explored space began to report unusual activity. Initially, these scouts assumed they were encountering minor exploratory vessels or research craft, nothing of real significance. But as they drew closer, the truth became impossible to ignore. The ships they observed were far more advanced than anything in their own fleets, sleek, fast, and heavily armed. These human vessels moved with a precision that suggested discipline, training, and intelligence far beyond the expectations of anyone who had encountered humans before. At first, the scouts attempted to communicate, sending signals in the languages and protocols of their respective empires. They hoped to confirm the presence of an unknown species and perhaps establish friendly contact, but the humans did not respond in ways the scouts could interpret. Instead, they observed and adapted, remaining just beyond engagement range while evaluating the alien craft. It was a level of strategic patience that the scouts had never seen. They reported back to their commanders, describing the humans as curious, highly mobile, and possibly dangerous, though none truly grasped the scale of what they had encountered. When the reports reached the higher echelons of alien civilizations, reactions were mixed. Some dismissed the scouts' warnings, attributing the sightings to exaggeration or misinterpretation. After all, how could a species from a small, distant planet pose a threat to empires that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years? Confidence and arrogance clouded their judgment. Other leaders, however, felt unease. They could sense something different about these humans, something they could not quantify. There was a tension in the air, an undercurrent of fear that grew each time new reports arrived. Yet, the majority still underestimated the humans, viewing them as an isolated anomaly rather than a true threat. Meanwhile, the humans continued their careful observation. They studied the scouts' technology, movement patterns, and communication methods. Every interaction, every maneuver, was an opportunity to learn. Humans analyzed weaknesses, mapped strengths, and calculated the potential impact of a future confrontation. Unlike many alien civilizations that relied heavily on sheer numbers or overwhelming firepower, humans emphasized strategy, intelligence, and adaptability. Their training programs drilled these concepts into every crew member, ensuring that each individual could act independently while remaining fully coordinated with the larger fleet. As weeks passed, the humans began testing the limits of their encounters. They allowed the scouts to venture closer, gauging their reactions, probing their senses, and recording their communication methods. The scouts, believing they were still in control, did not realize they were walking into a carefully orchestrated observation. Humans were not seeking conflict, they were gathering intelligence to prepare for the inevitable moment. When they would reveal their full capabilities, the patience displayed by humans was extraordinary, and it became increasingly clear that they operated on a level of discipline and foresight alien empires rarely witnessed. The situation escalated when human patrols began moving into regions previously thought secure. These outer systems were lightly monitored, assumed to be safe zones where alien powers did not maintain strong fleets. But the humans' presence in these areas caused immediate alarm. Communications were intercepted, and automated surveillance systems detected their movements. Entire sectors began to buzz with speculation. Who were these humans, and what were their intentions? Rumors spread quickly, fueled by the sudden and inexplicable disappearance of some scouts. The fear grew not from confirmed attacks, but from uncertainty. The realization that these humans operated in ways no one could fully predict. The first incidents that could not be ignored occurred. When scouts sent back desperate messages for help, some were destroyed outright. Others sent fragmented transmissions describing overwhelming firepower, precise coordination, and technology that bypassed conventional defenses. Alien leaders struggled to comprehend these reports. Their fleets were vast, their strategies complex, and their experience unmatched, yet humans seemed capable of neutralizing these advantages with ease. Panic began to ripple through the ranks of commanders, who suddenly realized that the species they had dismissed as insignificant could threaten the stability of entire regions. Alien empires reacted in a variety of ways. Some began reinforcing their borders, sending larger fleets to confront the humans, but many of these responses were too slow or poorly coordinated. The humans anticipated these moves, adapting their strategies and avoiding direct confrontation until they were ready to strike decisively. Unlike many species that acted impulsively, humans were methodical. They never wasted energy on unnecessary battles. Every engagement was calculated to maximize impact and minimize risk. It was a style of warfare that alien civilizations had rarely encountered, and it caused confusion and frustration at every level of command. At the same time, humans continued expanding their intelligence network. They observed alien communications, decoded signals, and monitored fleet movements. Using this information, they refined their tactics, predicting enemy behavior with uncanny accuracy. It became apparent that humans were not merely reactive, they were proactive, shaping the battlefield even before the alien civilizations realized there was a battle to fight. This level of foresight created a psychological advantage. Commanders found themselves hesitating, second-guessing orders, and questioning the reliability of their own intelligence. The humans' reputation as precise, calculated, and highly adaptive fighters grew with each encounter. The tension reached a peak when multiple alien empires attempted to coordinate a joint response. They believed that pooling their fleets and resources would be sufficient to overwhelm the humans. A coalition of warships was assembled, representing the combined might of three major empires. The plan was straightforward: identify human positions, trap them in a coordinated strike, and eliminate them before they could cause further disruption. Confidence was high. Alien leaders assumed their numerical superiority in advanced weaponry would guarantee victory. They could not have been more wrong. Humans, having studied such large-scale operations, were ready. They observed the coalition fleet's movements, identifying weaknesses and gaps in coordination. Using intelligence gathered from prior encounters, they anticipated the Allies' strategies and devised a counter that was both unexpected and devastating. They did not rely on brute force alone. Instead, they used deception, speed, and precise strikes to dismantle the coalition's cohesion. Communication lines were disrupted, supply chains were cut off, and panic spread among the Allied fleets. What should have been a simple demonstration of human weakness turned into a lesson in strategy and discipline. The first direct confrontations revealed a startling truth. Humans were not only technologically advanced, they were exceptionally disciplined. Each ship operated as part of an integrated system, following precise protocols while adapting to the unpredictable. Crew members acted with autonomy, making split-second decisions that complemented the larger strategy. Alien commanders had never faced such a combination of flexibility and coordination. Their traditional tactics, honed over centuries, failed against the humans' innovative approaches. Battles that should have been decisive for the aliens ended in confusion and retreat. At the same time, human forces remained cautious. They did not seek unnecessary destruction. Civilians and unarmed systems were avoided whenever possible. Humans focused on neutralizing threats and asserting control where necessary, demonstrating a strategic approach that emphasized long-term consequences over short-term glory. This behavior further baffled alien leaders, who assumed that any species with such military capabilities would act aggressively and indiscriminately. Humans proved that strength combined with restraint could be far more effective than brute force. As the situation developed, entire regions of space began to feel the impact of human activity. Alien governors, commanders, and populations started questioning their security. Rumors of unseen fleets moving through outer systems spread rapidly, creating fear and uncertainty. Even the most confident leaders could not ignore the growing pattern of human influence. Ships that had once patrolled these areas without threat now found themselves vulnerable, and the galaxy began to realize that humans were a presence that demanded attention. Ultimately, the rising challenge of Part 2 was not just about military strength, it was about perception, fear, and the psychological advantage humans created. By remaining patient, observing carefully, and striking with precision, humans demonstrated that an underestimated species could reshape the galaxy's balance of power without even fully revealing their capabilities. The aliens were no longer confident, the scouts were wary, and the coalition fleets began to realize that humans were a force unlike any other. The galaxy had underestimated them, and that underestimation was about to become a critical mistake by the end of this period. Humans had firmly established themselves as a presence that could not be ignored. Their combination of technology, intelligence gathering, and strategic patience created a scenario where alien civilizations were forced to rethink everything they had believed about dominance and power. The rising challenge was not just the battles or the fleets, it was the realization that the galaxy had never encountered a species like humanity before, and no one knew what they were capable of next. The stage was set for a turning point, where humans would no longer remain observers, but active participants reshaping entire systems and changing the course of galactic history forever. The rising tension between humans and the alien civilizations finally reached a critical stage. After weeks of observing human fleets and attempting to gauge their capabilities, the alien empires realized that this was no longer a matter of curiosity or minor threat. It was a situation that could no longer be ignored. Reports from scouts had escalated from strange sightings to alarming encounters, where humans demonstrated superior technology and strategic skill. Alien commanders, long accustomed to victory through sheer numbers and firepower, began to feel the first real pangs of doubt. What they had considered a minor nuisance was becoming a serious challenge. The first turning point came in the outer sectors, where humans had quietly established patrol zones that no alien fleet had previously considered significant. These areas were lightly monitored and lightly defended, chosen precisely because alien civilizations believed they posed no strategic threat. Humans, however, had studied the patterns of the empires and identified these gaps in surveillance as ideal opportunities. They began a series of operations that were precise, calculated, and highly effective. Ships moved in formation, conducting maneuvers designed to test alien responses while minimizing risk to themselves. Every action was a lesson for both the humans and their observers. Humans learned more about alien tactics, and aliens began to understand that they were facing something far beyond their expectations. The humans' first major test came when a small fleet of scouts from one empire attempted to confront them, believing that their experience in advanced technology would guarantee success. The alien scouts approached boldly, ready to assert dominance. Humans, however, had anticipated this move. Rather than engage in a straightforward battle, they executed a series of maneuvers that seemed unconventional, almost reckless. At first glance, They feigned weakness, drawing the scouts into carefully planned positions. Then, at the precise moment, they struck with coordinated attacks from multiple directions. The scouts were overwhelmed, unable to respond effectively to the speed, precision, and coordination of the human fleet. It was a demonstration that intelligence and strategy could defeat brute force, and it sent shockwaves through the alien command structure once the survivors returned with reports. The impact of this first encounter was not only tactical but psychological. Alien commanders began to realize that humans were capable of actions that defied conventional military logic. They did not follow the predictable patterns that centuries of warfare had taught the empires to expect. Instead, humans adapted instantly, exploiting weaknesses and creating opportunities where none seemed to exist. For alien leaders, this was both alarming and disorienting. Their confidence, once absolute, began to erode. The turning point was not a single battle, it was the realization that humans could operate in ways the galaxy had never seen, with a combination of technology, adaptability, and discipline that was unprecedented. As news of the scouts' defeat spread, human fleets began operating more openly, but still with caution. They moved into systems previously considered safe, demonstrating that they were willing and capable of challenging imperial authority when necessary. These operations were not acts of conquest in the traditional sense. Humans focused on strategic targets, disabling military infrastructure and neutralizing potential threats. They avoided unnecessary destruction, which confused and frustrated alien leaders who expected aggression and chaos from such a capable force. By maintaining control and precision, humans demonstrated that they were not only powerful but also disciplined, capable of reshaping conflict according to their own rules. The coalition of alien empires decided that decisive action was necessary. They could no longer rely on isolated fleets or regional patrols to contain the human threat. A massive coalition fleet was assembled, bringing together the combined forces of three major empires. The plan was to engage the humans in a large-scale battle, crush them with overwhelming firepower, and restore confidence in the galaxy's dominant powers. Commanders were confident in their superiority. They had numerical advantage in advanced technology, and centuries of experience coordinating massive fleets. They believed that this decisive confrontation would eliminate the human threat once and for all. Humans, however, were ready. They had observed the Empire's communication networks, learned their strategic patterns, and analyzed every detail of the coalition fleet's deployment. Unlike the alien commanders, humans did not rely solely on strength. They relied on intelligence, coordination, and adaptability. They studied the weaknesses in the coalition's plan, predicted likely responses, and prepared countermeasures for every scenario. The humans' preparation was meticulous, their understanding of the enemy precise, and their timing flawless. The galaxy had assumed humans were a minor species, but this assumption was about to be proven catastrophically wrong. When the coalition fleet finally encountered the human forces, the battle began with an almost anticlimactic calm. At first, the alien commanders saw what they believed were gaps and opportunities, confident in their ability to exploit them. But humans had anticipated every move. That human ships moved with extraordinary coordination, striking from multiple angles simultaneously. Communications between the coalition vessels became chaotic as humans disrupted their command networks and supply lines. Every action of the aliens was met with a precise, calculated response that neutralized their advantage. The battle quickly escalated from confusion to chaos. The turning point of the confrontation was a single, decisive maneuver. Humans executed a coordinated strike that isolated key command vessels, severed communications across the coalition fleet, and created zones where the aliens could no longer maneuver effectively. It was a brilliant tactical decision that left the coalition floundering. Their superior numbers could not compensate for the precision and adaptability of the human forces. Alien commanders watched in disbelief as their meticulously planned engagement unraveled in hours, then minutes. The humans had not only defeated them, they had done so with elegance, precision, and minimal unnecessary destruction. This turning point had consequences beyond the battlefield. Alien civilizations, long confident in their dominance, were forced to reassess everything they had assumed about humans. Intelligence reports, once dismissed as exaggeration, were now undeniable proof of human capability. Fleets that had patrolled the outer sectors with ease were now vulnerable. Entire empires began to realize that their borders were no longer secure, that a species they had overlooked could disrupt systems, fleets, and political structures with ease. The psychological impact of this realization was immense. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt replaced confidence and arrogance in the minds of many leaders. Humans continued to demonstrate strategic superiority. They did not overextend themselves. They avoided unnecessary risks while maximizing their advantage. Each engagement was carefully measured, ensuring that they maintained control over the battlefield and the larger strategic picture. Alien leaders began to understand that humans were not merely a tactical threat. They represented a fundamentally different approach to warfare. Intelligence, preparation, and adaptability were more important than numbers or brute force. This revelation shocked civilizations that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. As the turning point solidified, humans also began to influence political structures. Their success on the battlefield forced alien governments to reconsider alliances, negotiations, and power dynamics. Some leaders sought to negotiate with humans, hoping to prevent further destruction, while others tried to regroup and prepare for the next confrontation. Regardless of approach, the presence of humans had already begun to reshape the galaxy. Entire systems re-evaluated their defenses, trade routes were altered, and fleets were redeployed to anticipate human movement. The galaxy was in a state of heightened alert, and the humans, calm and disciplined, were at the center of this seismic shift. The key lesson of this period was that the galaxy had underestimated humans at every turn. Their patience, intelligence, and adaptability allowed them to achieve victories that seemed impossible. They did not rely on overwhelming force alone. They relied on understanding, predicting, and outmaneuvering their opponents. The turning point was not a single event, it was a series of strategic decisions, coordinated maneuvers, and precise actions that collectively demonstrated that humans were a force unlike any other. By the end of this phase, alien civilizations understood that the era of assuming dominance was over. Humans had proven that a species from a distant, overlooked planet could challenge empires with centuries of experience and technology. The turning point had been reached. The galaxy could no longer ignore humans, and those who had dismissed them now faced the reality that every calculation, assumption, and strategy needed to be re-evaluated. Humans were no longer observers, they were active participants, capable of reshaping the balance of power across entire systems. Through intelligence, patience, and precise execution, they outmaneuvered alien empires, turning the tide of the galaxy's perception. The turning point was not merely a battle, it was a revelation. Humans demonstrated that strategy, adaptability, and preparation could overcome even the most entrenched powers, and they set the stage for the decisive confrontations that would follow. Alien civilizations, humbled and uncertain, were now forced to acknowledge that a species they had underestimated could fundamentally alter the future of the galaxy. The galaxy had never witnessed anything like it. After the humans' decisive maneuvers in the outer sectors and their strategic victories over coalition fleets, entire systems began to feel the full weight of human power. Alien civilizations that had ruled for centuries suddenly found themselves scrambling, unable to maintain control over territories they had once considered secure. Command centers, orbital fortresses, and planetary defenses, which had seemed invincible, were now being dismantled with a combination of precision strikes, tactical brilliance, and calculated speed. The humans' approach was methodical, almost surgical, and it struck fear into the hearts of those who had underestimated them. It began with the outer systems, where humans had already established patrols and intelligence networks. These sectors were lightly defended, yet they formed critical supply lines and communication routes for the empires. Human fleets moved in coordinated waves, striking at key stations and infrastructure. They disrupted communications, disabled defense grids, and isolated command centers from one another. The result was chaos, not random destruction, but a deliberate dismantling of power structures that had held entire star systems in line. Alien commanders watched in disbelief as their sophisticated defenses, built over centuries and protected by vast fleets, were rendered ineffective. The humans' tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of relying on sheer firepower or overwhelming numbers, they emphasized strategy, timing, and adaptability. Ships moved in formations designed to confuse and divide enemy forces. Some engaged in direct combat to draw attention, while others bypassed defenses entirely to strike at critical points. Each action was coordinated, each maneuver calculated to maximize impact while minimizing unnecessary risk. Humans understood the importance of control, not chaos. They sought to neutralize threats and reshape the battlefield to their advantage. One of the most remarkable aspects of these operations was humans' ability to adapt in real time. Alien fleets were powerful, but they were often rigid in their tactics. They expected predictable patterns of engagement, relying on numbers and technology to win battles. Humans, however, thrived on unpredictability. Their crews were trained to act independently within the framework of a larger strategy, making split-second decisions that complemented the overall plan. If an enemy attempted to flank or regroup, humans responded immediately, exploiting weaknesses and adjusting their approach on the fly. This flexibility made them nearly impossible to predict, and alien commanders quickly realized that their standard tactics were ineffective. The first major campaign that demonstrated the full scale of human capability took place in a cluster of heavily fortified systems that had long been considered untouchable. These systems housed major military installations, production facilities, and population centers, all protected by layers of orbital defenses and fleet patrols. Alien leaders were confident that any attack would be repelled with minimal losses. Humans, however, had studied these defenses meticulously. They identified vulnerabilities, calculated optimal strike sequences, and prepared contingency plans for every possible response. When the attack commenced, it was a masterpiece of strategy. Human ships bypassed or neutralized key defenses, struck critical infrastructure, and forced alien fleets into disarray. Within days, entire systems that had been considered impregnable were either under human control or effectively neutralized as strategic threats. The speed and precision of these operations shocked the galaxy. News of entire systems falling under human influence spread rapidly, creating fear and uncertainty across neighboring sectors. Alien populations, who had grown accustomed to the dominance of their empires, began to panic as they witnessed the sudden collapse of power structures around them. Leaders attempted to rally their forces, but coordination was nearly impossible. Communications were disrupted, supply lines severed, and command hierarchies fractured. The humans' calculated approach had not only destroyed military power but also sown confusion and demoralization among those who had long relied on the strength of empires. In addition to direct military operations, humans also demonstrated remarkable restraint and focus. They did not engage in unnecessary destruction or civilian targeting. Their strikes were precise and intentional, designed to achieve strategic objectives without causing widespread suffering. This approach further confused alien leaders, who had expected a species capable of such power to act aggressively and indiscriminately. Humans were not simply conquering, they were restructuring the balance of power in a way that minimized chaos while maximizing effectiveness. This combination of power and restraint created a level of fear and respect that alien civilizations had never experienced before. The psychological impact on alien commanders and populations was immense. Entire fleets began to hesitate, unsure of how to respond to an opponent who seemed to anticipate their every move. Strategies that had worked for centuries suddenly failed. Supply lines that had once been secure were compromised. Communication networks, the lifelines of empires, were disrupted. Fear replaced confidence. Hesitation replaced decisive action, and doubt eroded morale. Humans had not only won battles, they had reshaped the mindset of those who had long assumed they were unshelled. SOLLENGEABLE. As humans moved deeper into the galaxy, their influence spread rapidly. They targeted key strategic systems, disabling infrastructure and neutralizing potential threats before they could be mobilized. Fleet commanders who had once believed they could dominate the galaxy found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Humans demonstrated that technological superiority alone was not enough. Strategy, adaptability, and coordination were equally, if not more, important. The aliens had long underestimated these qualities, assuming that numbers and firepower would guarantee victory. They were learning, often too late, that humans approached conflict in an entirely different way. The turning of entire systems was not limited to military power. Humans also influenced political structures, forcing empires to reconsider alliances, treaties, and governance. Leaders who had relied on intimidation or historical dominance were suddenly powerless to maintain control. Populations that had been loyal to their governments began to question their leaders' ability to protect them. Trade routes were disrupted, communication networks severed, and entire sectors were left vulnerable. The collapse was not chaotic, it was systematic, deliberate, and precise. Humans were reshaping the galaxy in a way that combined military power, strategic intelligence, and political influence, all while maintaining control and minimizing unnecessary destruction. The climactic nature of these operations became apparent when humans engaged multiple enemy fleets simultaneously. Rather than facing one isolated group, human forces coordinated attacks on several fronts, exploiting weaknesses and creating confusion. Alien commanders struggled to respond, often making mistakes that humans anticipated and exploited. The ability to operate across multiple systems simultaneously demonstrated not only technological capability, but also extraordinary planning and coordination. It was a level of operational sophistication that alien civilizations had never encountered and could barely comprehend. By the time humans completed their campaigns in these critical systems, the galaxy had changed forever. Empires that had seemed unassailable were fractured, demoralized, and forced to rethink everything they had assumed about power and control. Humans had proven that a species from a small, distant planet could challenge centuries-old civilizations, not through sheer numbers alone, but through intelligence, preparation, coordination, and adaptability. The collapse of entire systems was a testament to the effectiveness of their approach. They did not destroy for destruction's sake, they neutralized threats, restructured strategic control, and established a presence that the galaxy could no longer ignore. The lessons were clear to those who survived. Alien civilizations began to recognize the importance of flexibility, intelligence, and adaptation in warfare. Strategies that relied solely on brute force or numbers were no longer sufficient. Commanders realized that the humans' combination of discipline, foresight, and tactical innovation gave them an advantage that could not be matched by traditional means. The galaxy had witnessed not just battles, but a transformation in the understanding of power, strategy, and the role of intelligence in achieving victory. Humans, for their part, continued to operate with patience and discipline. They consolidated control over the systems they had neutralized, ensuring stability and maintaining order. Their focus remained on strategic objectives rather than immediate glory. By doing so, they demonstrated that strength without control is ineffective, and that true power lies not in destruction, but in the ability to shape outcomes with precision. The galaxy, humbled and unsettled, had no choice but to acknowledge that humans were a force unlike any other, capable of redefining the rules of interstellar conflict. In summary, Part 4 shows humans moving from decisive tactical victories to reshaping entire systems. Their combination of strategy, precision, adaptability, and restraint allowed them to neutralize empires, disrupt command structures, and create fear and uncertainty across the galaxy. Entire systems fell under human influence, not through chaos, but through calculated, disciplined action. Alien civilizations were forced to confront a new reality. Humans were no longer just an unknown species. They were a dominant force capable of collapsing empires and changing the galactic balance of power forever. The galaxy was quiet, but it was not peaceful. After humans had dismantled empires, neutralized fleets, and disrupted entire systems, the once confident civilizations were forced into a state of shock and uncertainty. Leaders who had believed themselves untouchable now struggled to maintain authority, while populations that had once been loyal questioned the very foundations of their governments. Entire sectors that had relied on centuries of tradition and stability were now destabilized, leaving a vacuum that no one could immediately fill. Humanity had proven its power, but it had done so with precision and intelligence, not chaos. The aftermath of their campaigns was not a scene of reckless destruction, but a carefully orchestrated reordering of galactic balance. Humans returned to their borders gradually, observing the reactions of alien civilizations without making unnecessary advances. Their fleets, though powerful, were not meant for occupation or conquest in the traditional sense. Instead, humans established a presence that signaled capability and control. Alien leaders, previously dismissive of humanity, now recognized the immense power they faced. Communications were cautious, and alliances that had been built on arrogance and fear began to falter. It was clear that open conflict with humans was no longer an option for any civilization that wished to survive. Humans had reshaped the galaxy. Without declaring dominion over it, they had made their presence undeniable and their potential unstoppable. The psychological impact on alien civilizations was profound. Entire fleets had been neutralized, fortresses rendered ineffective, and command centers disrupted. Leaders who had once relied on intimidation and overwhelming numbers found that their strategies were useless against a species that combined intelligence, adaptability, and discipline. Populations witnessed the fall of systems that had seemed invincible, and the fear that humans could strike again at any time became a constant concern. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy realized that dominance could not be assumed, had to be earned, and humans had demonstrated that they could redefine the rules of power with clarity and precision. Despite this, humans did not act recklessly. They focused on control and observation rather than expansion. Their fleets monitored sectors, ensuring that systems remained stable while alien civilizations attempted to regroup. Humans understood that fear alone could reshape behavior. By demonstrating their capabilities, they forced empires to reconsider aggressive actions, forming a balance based on respect rather than submission. This strategic patience was emblematic of humanity's approach to power. They wielded influence without unnecessary destruction, proving that true strength lay in intelligence, restraint, and preparation. As alien civilizations attempted to adapt, they began negotiating cautiously. Some sought alliances, hoping to secure safety through diplomacy rather than confrontation. Others attempted to rebuild fleets and fortifications, but the shadow of human capability loomed large. The humans' reputation had spread beyond the systems they directly influenced. Across the galaxy, political and military leaders now recognized that their calculations had been flawed. The underestimated species from a small, distant planet had demonstrated skills, technology, and strategy that could not be ignored. Humanity's presence alone changed the way civilizations approached defense, diplomacy, and governance. The human approach to the aftermath was deliberate. They did not seek to humiliate or destroy alien populations unnecessarily. Their operations had been focused on strategic points, military command centers, fleet depots, and critical infrastructure. Civilian populations were protected when possible, emphasizing that humans were not driven by hatred or conquest, but by order and precision. This distinction unsettled alien leaders further. They had anticipated a chaotic, destructive force, but humans operated on principles of calculation and discipline. Every move was measured, ensuring that power was asserted without unnecessary collateral damage. This careful approach extended to communication and observation. Humans maintained surveillance over key sectors, monitoring fleets, political decisions, and potential threats. They did not intervene unless necessary, but their presence alone altered behavior. Empires began reallocating resources defensively. Populations adjusted to the knowledge that humans could intervene at any moment, and leaders reconsidered strategies that had once seemed foolproof. The psychological dominance humans exercised was as important as their technological and tactical power. Entire systems changed the way they operated, simply because humans had proven they could enforce consequences with precision and restraint. The aftermath also brought lessons for alien civilizations. Commanders realized that reliance on sheer numbers or rigid tactics was insufficient. Fleet coordination, intelligence gathering, and strategic adaptability were now essential for survival. Governments understood that arrogance and underestimation could lead to collapse. Humans had not only demonstrated military superiority but had also redefined the criteria for power and strategy. The galaxy was learning that intelligence, discipline, and foresight could outweigh centuries of dominance, and that survival required adaptation, innovation, and humility. Meanwhile, humans consolidated their achievements without arrogance. They repaired damaged infrastructure, ensured the stability of critical systems, and maintained readiness to respond if necessary. Their fleets, though formidable, were not a permanent occupation force. Instead, humans emphasized flexibility, mobility, and strategic positioning. They understood that lasting influence came not from dominating populations but from demonstrating capability and instilling caution. Alien civilizations, once dismissive, now respected human judgment and power, even without enforcing direct control. Humans had reshaped the galaxy's political and military landscape. The reflections of humans themselves revealed their understanding of these events. Their victories were not measured simply in destroyed fleets or captured systems. They recognized the importance of strategy, coordination, and discipline, and how these qualities allowed a smaller, underestimated species to challenge vast empires. They understood the value of restraint and intelligence, knowing that unnecessary aggression could undermine long-term goals. By maintaining focus on strategic objectives rather than immediate conquest, humans ensured that their influence would endure, shaping galactic behavior for generations to come. Alien civilizations, humbled and cautious, began to reassess their priorities. Treaties and alliances were reconsidered, fleets were restructured, training programs revised, and governance adjusted to account for the new reality. The galaxy's leaders realized that humanity represented not only a threat, but also an opportunity to rethink traditional approaches to power. The humans' combination of strategy, intelligence, and discipline had created a new standard. Dominance could no longer rely solely on numbers, technology, or intimidation. Adaptability, foresight, and careful planning had proven to be decisive. Even ordinary populations of alien worlds felt the change. Citizens witnessed the speed and precision with which humans had altered the balance of power. Fear, awe, and respect became common reactions. Entire systems, once confident in their imperial rulers, adjusted their behavior, anticipating the potential for human intervention. Human influence extended far beyond direct military action. It permeated political, social, and cultural structures. Their approach demonstrated that power could be exercised without tyranny, that influence could be maintained without oppression, and that a species could command respect through intelligence, strategy, and foresight. As the galaxy settled into this new reality, humans continued to monitor developments. They remained vigilant, aware that other civilizations would attempt to adapt and recover, yet they also understood that their primary objective had been achieved. The galaxy now recognized humanity's power, capability, and strategic superiority. The collapse of empires and the disruption of entire systems had demonstrated the consequences of underestimating humans, and no civilization would make that mistake again. The universe had been forced to acknowledge that humanity was no longer an insignificant backwater species. It was a dominant, intelligent, and disciplined force, capable of shaping the course of galactic history. In conclusion, the aftermath of human campaigns redefined the galaxy. Civilizations were forced to adapt, rethink strategies, and acknowledge that intelligence, discipline, and strategic foresight could surpass brute force and centuries of dominance. Humans had demonstrated their power with precision, restraint, and clarity, leaving entire systems reshaped and empires humbled. Their presence alone established a new standard of influence, where respect, caution, and strategic awareness replaced arrogance and assumed superiority. The galaxy had learned a crucial lesson. Humanity was a force unlike any other, and their emergence had forever altered the balance of power, leaving alien civilizations to reflect on their underestimation and adapt to a universe in which humans would always play a decisive role.